Good morning, everybody. I've been saying hello as people have been joining us. I am Jody Dare. I have been a software consultant with Profit Business Group for a little over 2 years now. And as Cody already mentioned, this is mostly a repeat of the user group session that we did back in April in Payables Management. But when I looked at the names of the attendees, I did see that a fair amount of you are fairly advanced, so I have done a little bit of changes and customization to try and make it so that there are some new information for you here. So with that said, we're going to move along. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions along the way. I do have a fair amount of information to cover, so I'm going to try and move as fast as possible. And I may have to cut some of the questions short during the presentation, but we will have time at the end to be able to take your questions, and I will stay on the line afterwards so that, sorry, I got one question here. Can I make someone a presenter?
Hi.
I don't know how to do that.
I mean, if you go attendees,
yeah,
open that pane, and then right-click on sort of you can make this presenter, but that would make you not the presenter.
Yeah. So, Dorothy, I'm going to get Cody to call you directly to find out what issues you are having. Can you see my screen at all? Or is that the problem? Because if I make you the presenter, other people will not be able to see my screen. Okay, so moving along, I do have a little bit of limited time here, so we're going to move straight into Payables Management, and we're going to go from there. So we're going to cover off these topics today, if at all possible. These are big, mostly these are the issues and questions that we get most often in versions of 2015 and 2016 GP. And I want to review some of the features of these transactions, and I'm kind of stumbling a second. So we're going to move through these items, and then we're going to go on from there. So document attach. Just to let you guys know, there is actually a Microsoft bug out there right now with document attach. There are workarounds for it. It was first noticed when they released GP 2016, and we have found workarounds for this. But it is absolutely fantastic, and if you are not using document attach as of yet in your organization, I would strongly suggest that you do. Reason being is document attach will allow you to scan and attach multiple different file types to most transactions within GP. It is specifically used for, most often used for payables management, and that's so that companies can start to go wireless. A fair amount of vendors these days will actually send invoices electronically. You don't necessarily get a paper copy anymore. So my question to any of our users is, why would you print a copy of it when you can attach that document directly to the transaction itself? If you haven't already set up document attach, I would strongly encourage you to include your IT in the discussion about the document attach setup, because it does require some forethought. It will affect your server memory because all of the attachments that you are adding take up space on your server. So if your server doesn't have enough space, you need to make sure your IT expands the memory capabilities. It will also require you to have permissions set up to a specific folder on your network, and you need to make sure that the users will have permissions to that file folder itself. When you are doing any scanning of your documents or saving of your documents, we don't suggest that you create subfolders into this attachment folder. And what I mean by that is, If you have one root attachment folder, don't make subfolders within that. So don't do an attachment and then go one for MTS or one for Manitoba Hydro, because these transactions and these documents will actually delete from that folder, and you're just going to end up causing yourself issues if you create subfolders within there. We can set up in Document Attach for documents to flow from one module to another. And what I mean by that is if you are entering into a contract with a particular vendor and it's going to require you to outflow cash, you may want that document to flow from your payables into receivables if you have to record a credit or cash back from that document. That contract that you sign and attach to the transaction entry in payables can actually flow into receivables, or it can flow onto the vendor maintenance card so that you have the information at your fingertips of what that contract is about. You can also make it so that documents can be emailed to your approvers if you have set up workflow. So what this means is you don't have to take, your users don't have to take a stack of papers, drop it on a manager's desk so that the managers can review the transactions before they approve the file. All of the attachments or all of the invoices can be sent to your manager in the workflow approval email so that they can see what's included and approve the documents that way. There have been some advancements since Document Attach was first released. Before, you would have only been able to attach PDF documents, but now you have the capabilities of being able to attach Word, PDF, Excel, JPEG, and emails. So if you don't see this paperclip in the top ribbon bar of any of your windows, you do not have Document Attach enabled, and you would need us or your system administrator to be able to set it up so that you can. There's also another feature that has come out in 2015 and 2016 that you can now review any documents that may have been attached and possibly deleted. Even though they may be deleted from the documents themselves, they do not go away completely. You still have the ability to be able to review those if somebody accidentally deleted them. You can set security with Document Attach as to whether or not you want documents to be deleted at all, or possibly have a password attached if you do want users to be able to delete. One of the best practices of Document Attach is if you were scanning documents, I would strongly suggest that you scan directly to the file folder location on your network that we've set up as the attachments folder. And the reason for that is Microsoft operating systems have built-in security so that if you have a scanner attached directly to a workstation, if you scan directly to your workstation and then move that document over to the network folder for the attachment, Microsoft will not allow that document to be attached because it never originated from that folder to be in the first place. So if you have a photocopier that has scanning capabilities, just set that file pathway to scan to file to be directly to the attachment folder if that's an option for you. There is now the capability of scanning multiple pages, whereas it wasn't available before GP 2016. You had to scan single pages one at a time if you wanted to scan directly. But now in GP 2016, you can scan multiple pages as one document. So let's show you what this looks like. In purchasing, if you have a transaction, and you can see that I've got my document attached paperclip up at the top. I'm going to just create a transaction without a batch for one of my vendors, and I'm going to say that it's Shaw Cable Systems. You have to create a document, and let's say it's worth $100. In order to attach a document, all of those documents need to be in a batch. So if I go to click attach, it's going to ask me if I want to save transaction or save the changes to this transaction. If I click save, you can't. You need that batch ID. So I'm just going to attach a batch. Multiple transactions into a folder on my network called attachments. I have all of these documents that are set up in here, and I have made the setup of documents attach in my case that as soon as I attach these documents to my transaction, these files will actually delete from this location. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to attach a couple of these documents. My system automatically knows to open up the attachments folder for me, and I'm going to attach that one, and there it is there. I can attach an email. I can attach Word documents. I can attach something else, whether it be a JPEG, anything like that. So if I have all of these documents attached, I can review any of them. If I highlight that transaction and I go preview, up will come the document view itself. So I'm going to say OK. And if I save this transaction and then I go back to it, you're going to see that I've got my paperclip up at the top has changed. So if I look at the attachments now, it shows me everything that's there. If I accidentally attached a PDF that I shouldn't, all I have to do is highlight it and then either right-click and select Delete Row, or I can also click on this Delete button over on the top right. And it asks me, do I want to delete? Yes. Here's my deleted document. So it never goes away as I stated, and I can always preview that transaction at any point in time. So if I go OK and then save that. Now the bug that is out there currently, if I post a transaction that has documents attached to it in a batch, it will not show that there are documents attached to that transaction until it moves from open to history. So meaning when it is fully paid, then I will be able to see that there are transactions out there. So one of the workarounds that Microsoft has suggested for this is to, before you post that transaction, delete the batch and hit post. When I go and review that transaction, and I've got it in open as of today, I can still see that there's attachments there. They never go away. They just don't appear in the ribbon bar as if there is something attached. Okay. Any questions on documents attached before we move on to EFTs? Good. All right. So let's head right on back and let's move into EFT payments. EFT payments is one of those evolutionary items similar to document attached. Most companies these days are moving beyond issuing a paper check for multiple different reasons. One, it is cumbersome. Two, you have to pay for the printing of the check itself. Three, you have to pay somebody to stuff the envelope and pay for the stamp, and you have to pay for somebody to take it to your post office if you don't have a mailman come directly to your business. So most vendors out there these days actually prefer to have electronic payments directly deposited into their bank account. It saves them the time, effort, and energy of going to the bank as well. So we've been seeing a lot of our clients request in the last year to move to EFT Payments and Remittances. So what is this? It stands for electronic funds transfer. You're transferring from one bank account to another. So it's virtual money rather than physical cash. It's less expensive than issuing the checks, and it's convenient. Plus, If you have your bank rec person recording their bank reconciliation at the end of the month, you're not ending up with stale dated checks because the money's directly gone from your bank account immediately. Move on to the next slide. So an EFT file, what happens, the process flow that you need to think of as the payer is you need to get your vendor's banking information. And all that it is your vendor will have to make sure that they allow you to deposit cash into their bank. You're not going to be withdrawing funds from the bank. That's a special permission that your vendor would have to set up with the bank themselves. But GP itself has hundreds of different file formats that are compatible with every financial institution within Canada. So it doesn't matter if you're a credit union, Scotiabank, Royal Bank, TD, any of those banking institutions, we have the appropriate file format for you to be able to send to your bank and tell them, take the money out of my bank account and send it to my vendors. If you are considering setting up EFT, you do need to make arrangements with your bank to do testing prior to the actual first disbursement. I've seen your banks charge anywhere between $10 up to $35 to do a test file. But in the long run, that $10 to $35 makes up for itself very quickly on the cash that you save in printing your checks and mailing your checks at almost $1 a stamp these days. It won't take very long for you to recover that cost as well. We would help you with that testing and making sure everything is working properly. And whatever we can do to assist if the test file is rejected, we will absolutely help you in adjusting whatever your bank requires. There is some setup. I'm going to move through some of these slides. This slide will be available to you after the presentation, but I'm just going to review some of this information with you directly on a vendor card. When you are sending out an EFT file, you still need to notify your vendors that you've sent them money. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. If you are sending them an email, you need to make sure that your vendor has provided you an email address of where they want the notification to go. And you need to send them a remittance slip, which basically details the same thing that is on a check stub. It says how much the total payment is and what invoices you are paying, so that your vendor can apply the payment against the same transactions that you have. We have some preset remittance messages that can go out in an email, as well as if you have a specific email message that you want to go out, and the remittance form itself, it doesn't need to be fancy because you're just notifying them, but we can absolutely add your logo. We can change some of the formatting for you in the form of a template. So there is some customization available if you wish. There was a question here. Just give me 1 second. Lise, with the remittance, if you click on enable, if you go back, if you go back in, it's not clicked off anymore. It depends upon what it is that you are clicking. That was interesting. It depends upon what you're clicking on, Lise. If you give me just 1 moment, we're going to jump into the card itself, and I'll see if I can't recreate that for you. So let's go and take a peek at EFT. All right. So I have a vendor that I've added some EFT information on directly. So here's your vendor maintenance card. In order to get to the EFT and email information, you have to click on the address button, and up will come your address ID. If you have different addresses for your vendor, you'll note that we've got a couple of different address IDs assigned to this particular vendor. It's the remit to address ID that I want to review at the moment. So if I pull up my address ID card, I need to change this to my remit to address. And once I'm here, I need to do a couple of things. In the button, pardon me, on the bottom right for EFT Bank, I need to add the banking information for my vendor. You need to make sure that your region is set to Canada. You need to put in your transit routing number, their banking information, what currency it is, their bank institution code, branch code, and what type of account it is. There are some fields that are slightly different in here depending upon which bank you are using. But the biggest one that people get caught up with and get stuck on is the transit routing number. It is the 5-digit bank branch, and then their 3-digit bank institution number. So typically on a check, you'll see the institution number, the branch number, and then the bank account number. For the transit routing number, it's the reverse. It's the branch number, then the institution code, and then a separate line for the bank number. That's where you add their banking information. You also need to add their addresses. So on their addresses, if you click on the little globe beside the address ID is when the address information pops up. You need to make sure that you've got your email address for who you wish to receive the remittance information, if you wish to email it to them, in this field here where it says email addresses. The bottom half of this window where it asks for email, homepage, and all of that information, that is just for information purposes only. GP does nothing with it. If you want GP to automatically email directly out of GP to remittance, it needs to be in the top half here. So I'm going to click Save, and it's going to ask me for my connection password here in 1 second. I've been having some issues with my addresses and my email here, so it's I apologize if I end up stuck at this point. So while that's waiting to do a connection here, and it seems to have frozen a little bit. All right. I happen to be frozen at the moment because it's trying to communicate with my email. But you need to also make sure that you have your banking information updated on your bank or your checkbook card. So where you'll find that information is in financial, cards, and checkbook. You select your checkbook, and once you select your checkbook, there is a EFT button on there where you add your banking information, and that is meant for the EFT file itself, and that EFT file needs that so when you send it to your bank knows who it is that it's speaking to. Am I still frozen? I am. Well, that's just poopy. Great. That was my polite way of not swearing. I'm just going to say cancel here because I've got some issues, obviously, with GP trying to connect to my exchange, but it's got me out of there, so we're okay. So I'm going to save that information and close this and save all of it. So let's quickly show you where I was talking about to add your banking information. So under Cards Financial, I'm going to go into the checkbook. And I'm going to choose my checkbook where I'm going to be dispersing funds from. So I said in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to have your EFT banking information. And here's my information that I've set up. This is my bank information that my bank needs. I fill in the required fields. And I tell GP, where do I want this file to go to? So I've got a file folder that I have set up on my network where I'm going to be secure, because keep in mind your banking information and your vendor's banking information is on there. So whomever is preparing the EFT file should have permissions to that folder on your network, but make sure that not everybody in your company has access to that spot. Because I'm doing this through Payables, I'm going to click on Payables Options, And you can set very specific EFT numbering, which can be different from your checks. So I've chosen to set up EFT numbering. I've set a specific numbering pattern, which I've identified logically as EFTs, and this is that file folder location that I'm going to be sending it from. Once you've had your setup complete of both your vendor, your checkbook, and your file pathways, you can then create transactions to be dispersed by EFT. You need a batch. So I'm going to call this an EFT batch. And in my batch itself, I've already had it pre-set up. You need to make sure that your toggle is set to EFT. Once you do that, GP will take over the required functions of that batch so that you can process your EFTs properly. So I'm going to select payments for that vendor that I just set up with my EFT banking information, which is Ace Travel, and I'm going to select that one payment. If you've used the Edit Check Batch window before, you'll note that the difference in the window from a check batch to an EFT batch is this process button. It used to say print checks, but now it just says process. And GP will take you through the required windows to finish off your processing. So I'm going to select process. It does open me up to the print payable check window, but you'll see that my check numbering for the EFTs has been grayed out because it's going to take all of my transactions that I've selected and number them appropriately, starting at EFT, a gazillion zeros, and a 5. And it's going to say what my check date is. I click process from here. GP opens up my next window form. So I'm going to select the remittance form, and I'm going to tell GP to send the document in an email, and if not, it's going to print if there is no email attached. So I'm going to hit process. I would get stuck here at the same login. I'm just going to say it doesn't work, and I'm going to get an error because my email is not working properly. So I'm going to select print and go process, and it's going to print a remittance form. I'm just going to show you what it looks like. It's going to open in Word. Here is the basic out-of-the-box remittance form. So it tells me who my vendor is, what the payment number is, what the check number, which is my EFT format, and here's my document that I was paying. Like I said, we can customize this for you. I really don't see much need in that, simply for the fact that you're just sending it to your vendor, but we absolutely can if you wish. If I was able to email out of here, I would have gotten a separate form that would have popped up that said if my email was successful. I'm going to select post after that and hit process. This is going to be the EFT register, which is basically the same thing as a check register, just an EFT format. So this would be your batch total that would tell you how much in an EFT batch is that you've sent. And then close that. I do have an example for you of what that EFT looks like that I sent yesterday. Just pop this up and move this over. I was able to successfully send one to myself yesterday, so it's not working today. You can see this is what your vendor would receive. So they would receive the attachment in PDF format. And here's what it looks like when your vendor receives it. Once again, I had 2 transactions to review. I did not create a vendor remittance email ad or email message, but you can put in something like, hi vendor, and put in the vendor's name. It would automatically populate for you. And it would say, hi vendor, please find attached the current remittance payment scheduled to be deposited into your account on this particular day. We go back to here. So we printed, we processed our payment, we printed the EFT, and it's sent out, and I posted it. So there's only one step left that I need to do. I actually need to generate the file and send it to my bank. So in the processing of purchasing transactions, right down here where it says generate EFT file, I select the checkbook, that I need to create. And here's my batch. This is the batch that I use to create my payment. What you can do is, because where the banks are recovering their funds from people no longer sending out checks, is they recover the funds in the processing of payments. Typically, banks will charge a flat fee to generate and push out a file of payments. So what I suggest to people is you can process EFT batches as many times as you want, but if you want to send out one file to the bank to save on fees, send it out once a week. So your payables clerk can process EFTs throughout the week, as many EFT batches as they wish, and then when they come into this window, you can select more than one batch, and it'll group them all together and disperse to your bank. I can set the transmission date and the settlement date. So what's different between the check date, transmission date, and settlement date? We set the check date in the batch itself when we are generating the payments. In this window, the transmission date is typically set to the date that you're sending the file, and if the settlement date is the day you want your bank to push the payment. So you can have them all different if you wish. Typically, they're very much the same because people will process an EFT batch, send it, and settle it all on the same day. Once I've selected my batches, I go generate. Once you've run the generate, it says it's going to want to send the file transfer, and it's going to say, I would typically say yes, but because my email's not working, I'm going to say no. But I am going to get a successful message saying that my file was created properly. If you look at just this route here, you can see this is the route that I set up when I turned on EFT sending capabilities in my checkbook. It's listed it as EFT payment, which is what I said I wanted the file to be named. It gives me my bank checkbook ID and the day of the transaction. So I'm going to say OK. From here, you are done processing EFTs within GP. What you need to do from here is you need your person who has access to the bank to go into that file secure location and find that payment batch that is ready to be sent to the bank. And if I open this up, this is what it looks like. It looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, but to us GP consultants, it does actually mean something. It's all of the information that you've set up on the vendor card, your checkbook card, and batch totals, and the file format that your bank needs. Lise, did I answer your question on the vendor? Or was it when you go to email and you select enable, it turns off? Was that the issue you were having? Maybe Lise, you can stick around at the end. Oh, the issue I was having was Wednesday when I click enable. Which enable button? Was it based upon the doc type or on this enable? Lise, if you don't mind sticking around at the end of the session, we'll keep going, and I'd be happy to answer that question and see if we can't resolve that for you. I'll send form as an email. If you don't have the email piece set up properly within the back end of GP, you may have some issues with it. And what I can do is I can show you that in your environment at the end. I can share screens with you and show you where to find that, okay? All right. Any other questions on EFT payments? No? Okay. One of the cool new features about GP 2016, and it is brand new in 2016, is you now have the capabilities of being able to batch credit card transactions together and pay them as one large lump check batch. So let me differentiate this for you. Let's go back into our slideshow. Okay, so the old way with credit cards was really quite cumbersome, and if you didn't actually process a credit card payment very specifically, it became very difficult for you to find the proper transactions when you went paying your credit card. So how does that work? We as consultants would have told you that on the payables transaction entry window, you set that payables transaction entry to the vendor where the charge took place. So I always use Staples as the example. I have a user who goes to Staples and buys a box of paper. When they bring me back the slip that I paid for that box of paper by my Visa card, I need to enter into GP a payables transaction entry, the vendor being Staples, and the purchase of the box of the paper. We then would have told you to enter in the field where it says credit card the total of that box of paper, and then when you hit tab, up opens this other window where you select your credit card, and then we would have told you to put in the receipt number field the year, the month, the day, Staples, and as much of the rest of the invoice or document number that would have been available to you, and the date that the transaction happened. As soon as you do that and you say okay and you post this transaction, it moves from Staples, it shows fully paid on the Staples vendor transactions, and moves over to Visa as an open transaction still to be paid, because I have resolved the amount owing to Staples, but I have not resolved the amount owing to Visa. I still have to pay my Visa card. When I go to pay my Visa card, I have to select all of those transactions. Where this became a problem was if I have more than one charge that is the exact same amount on my statement for the month, if I did not enter the receipt number the way I've indicated here, how would you know which transaction it was? It was very difficult to find, and you were possibly resolving and applying documents that may not have been what was required. So what GP has done in 2016 only is they've added into the batch entry, and as soon as you say that you're paying by a form of payment of a check, instead of it just used to being check and EFT, you now have a toggle button for credit card. Once you select credit card, it allows you to choose the credit card that you want this payment to apply to, and it moves all of the transactions over in one transaction and identifies on your credit card transaction what those charges were that it's moving over. So what does that look like? So if I go and I create a batch, and I'm going to call this credit card, and the origin has to be computer check. As soon as I do that, I have the toggle open up for credit card. Once I've done that, it's now changed to my card ID. So I'm going to change and select my card ID to be retail credit card, and I'm going to save that batch. So when I'm processing my transactions and I'm entering the invoices from my vendors, that processing has not changed at all. This is just my transaction, so I don't need, I do not need the batch for right now, for this purpose anyway. So I'm just going to call this June 2017, and I'm going to say it's $100. I am not going to pay it by credit card. I'm going to leave this blank, and it's going to go on to the account and post that transaction. Don't need that. Don't need that. So now if I go and I pay that transaction, I'm going to go to Edit Check, and I'm going to put it into my credit card batch. My apply date is going to be there, and here's my MCS that I've selected. And I'm going to apply that $100 payment or transaction that I just created. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to hit Save. Go post my credit card batch, And I'm going to go, why will never let me post? I have to print, sorry. Print, credit card, and process. All right, and then I'm going to post. Remittance information must be posted. Yes, you can, but it doesn't really make a difference because this is going to be paid by credit card. I'm not sending my credit card a remittance form. So I'm just going to say continue. So what that's done is it's moved that transaction from my MTS, and it's now showed that it's in history, and there's my payment. But now if I go to the vendor that is attached to my credit card, it shows that transaction of $100, but when I drill into it, it shows there's my MTS invoice, and it shows $100. So now when I go to actually physically pay my, my Visa or whatever the credit card happens to be, I pay the vendor for the credit card. I'm going to send a direct payment, and here's all of my transactions that have been pushed over directly from that credit card, and it would allow me to pay them that way. So you can always see when you go back onto your credit card who that originating transaction came from. Saves tons of time when it comes to processing credit cards now. All right. Any questions on credit card payments? Quiet audience today. All right. Moving right along. Recurring payables. At user group, we had a fair amount of questions about recurring payables. So recurring payables, some people use it, and a fair amount of people aren't. And I guess I'm a little curious by that, is because inherently, I'm lazy. I don't like to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. I would prefer to save it and just hit a button to record those charges. So recurring payables are transactions that occur with a regular frequency. So whether it be a, Cody, would you be able to assist Marina? She's having the same issue as what Dorothy was. So recurring payables are transactions that occur with regular frequency, whether they be monthly or biweekly. Marina, Cody Pearson from our office is about to call you, so he can assist you in being able to see the screen. Those recurring payables, we can set the transaction to be recurring within a batch. It is the only time GP will allow you to use the exact same document number and have it be repeated throughout the recurrence of these transactions. And enter the transaction once and let GP do the rest of the listing. But there has to be some consistency with these recurring payables. It has to be the same vendor over and over and over again. But within that, you can have two types of transactions. You can have the same amount that occurs every month, but just the posting dates change. And I always use the example of MTS or SHA as strictly an overhead cost. So I know that my SHA internet is the exact same amount every month, time and time and time again. So those transactions will stay the same. Rather than me key them every single month, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter that transaction once, and I'm going to tell GP change the posting dates for me. The other possibility is it is the same vendor that happens on the same frequency, but the amounts may slightly change. Typical example of that is if you have an external payroll provider and you need to record the payroll entry for that payroll provider. Payworks is a good example. So I have payroll every 2 weeks. My amounts may change slightly, but if I set up a recurring transaction, I can amend those values on their own with very little effort. So that looks like you have to set up your batches first. So I have two different batches here. I have a monthly batch. So I've labeled my batch logic said it's monthly. I put in a comment that says what the frequency is. It's recurring monthly payables. And I've changed my frequency in this drop-down box, you have multiple choices for frequency. So how often does these transactions repeat themselves? In my example, I'm saying monthly. It's going to show me my next posting date. If I were to set a recurring posting with an infinite end, I would say I want to keep this transaction or this batch posting until I reach 12 transactions. This is good for recurring contract amount. So if I have a contract that's going to last a year and every month I need to pay $5,000, I would put it in a recurring batch and I would set the recurring posting to only be 12. It shows me the last time that this was posted and how many times that this batch is posted already. I can see that I've got 3 transactions in this batch. I also have, Doreen, can you restrict who can post this batch? Absolutely, you sure can. That would be set up within your GP security. And yes, you can set who has the ability to post and who does not. I have another recurring batch called payroll, and I've set my frequency to be biweekly. So every 2 weeks, this posting date will change. So I've posted this transaction up to May the 5th, and I've posted this transaction twice, and the total is $25,000. So if I go into transaction entry and I use the lookup, you will see those 3 transactions that I have sitting in my monthly batch. I have my payroll transaction for paywork sitting in my payroll batch. So if I just pull up my Shaw, and this is my monthly internet, my document number says internet. It will post with the document number being internet repetitively until I pull this transaction out of this particular batch. You can see that my next batch date is June the 1st. So if I pull up my rent to Morguard, it says that it's rent. Next posting date is that. And my third one is the MTS. So once I've entered these transactions and I've set my proper distributions on those, all I need to do is post my batch. So you can see, I want to point out specifically to you that I've got May the 12th as this next posting date for my rent, and I've got June 1st as a posting date for my internet. So if I go to my batch, I select my monthly batch. All I have to do from here, now that my transactions are entered the first time and saved in this batch, is just hit post. If I pull this up to screen now, I don't care about my distributions. We're going to look at this batch, or this batch edit list. It's going to show that it's posted those transactions for me. There's my internet. There's my rent as of June the 1st. And there's my MTS as of May the 12th. If I go and look at those transactions again, my Shaw has advanced to July, my Morguard has advanced to July, and my MTS has advanced exactly 1 month from the previous one, which was May the 12th to June. I have entered my transactions with hitting one button. I do not have to rekey them over and over and over again. So that's how you enter ones that repetitive. I can technically, if I have all my fiscal periods open, I can technically hit post 12 times, post for a whole entire year in a matter of seconds, if my amounts don't change. So I'm just going to show you quickly how Payworks works. So on one that is a biweekly, and I need to adjust my payroll. I could adjust my payroll to be $26,000. It's the same vendor, same document. My amounts change. So I can change. It was $25,000. I'm changing it to $26,000. I need to go in and change my distributions, and I can save a bunch of transactions or a bunch of GL accounts and adjust the entry itself. I say, okay, I've got something isn't right there. So I'm just going to hit default, change, and I'm just going to put in a full 26,000 because I know I'm getting close to running out of time here. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to say save. Go back to my payroll batch. And I've got one transaction. Next posting date is June the 5th. I'm going to hit post. I don't care. And if I pull up the batch again, my posting date has advanced. And if I look at my transaction, it has also advanced to the next 2-week pay period. So you can save the transaction and just amend the values if you wish. That's recurring payables. Any questions on recurring payables? No? Okay, good. So a couple of really cool features. These features have been available in 2015 and 2013, so they have been around for a little bit, but I don't believe people are using them to their capabilities. So a couple of the tips and tricks that I showed at the user group, and I'll repeat here, is everybody has duplicate vendors. Everybody has vendors that end up getting bought out by somebody else, and you can, if you end up getting bought out, perfect example right now is MTS was bought out by Bell, but MTS is no longer going to be MTS. It's now going to be Bell MTS or TELUS. So you may want to maintain that history and keep all of those transactions from MTS and switch them over to a new vendor ID to have the new information, but maintain the history from the old vendor. So the way you do that is under Utilities, there is a feature at the bottom called Vendor Combiner and Modifier. This is only available to your users if you grant them the security to have that. Anybody who is a power user or has the system administrator password, you can go in there and see this. Everybody else, it typically is not available. So if you're doing mass amounts of combining or changing of vendor IDs, then you can import a file and you can reach out to any one of the GP consultants and we'll tell you what the format is that should be the proper file format so you can import those vendor changes directly. But if you're doing just one, you have the option of combining or modifying. So if I want to change my ID from MTS to TELUS, you can just do a modifier and change the old vendor ID and put it into the new vendor ID called TELUS. Or if you have duplicates where somebody has entered an additional vendor card where they shouldn't have, and you have transactions occurring on both vendors and you want to combine them so all the history is together, you would leave it at Combiner. So in my system right now, I have 2 MTSs listed. So I have an MTS dot and an MTS Inc. And just to show you what this is going to look like, I'm going to move everything from MTS, which is all of these transactions, into MTS Inc. because that's what it should be. So I want all of those other ones to appear now in this particular transaction or under this vendor. If I go back to my combiner and I select my MTS, and I put it into my destination vendor ID of MTS Inc. And it's going to just say that they're different, and that's fine. That's because of the way I set up one of my vendors. I have different currencies. So I'm going to go process. Oh, hang on. It's going to get cranky at me. One moment. Let me fix that. So hit process, and it's going to make sure saying you can't undo this. Make sure you've got a backup. It absolutely is recommended. I'm going to hit continue. It's going to take a couple minutes to process. Hopefully not that long.
A lot of vendors do not.
And you're going to get an output at the end, and it's going to say that we were able to successfully combine MTS Dot with MTS Inc. And if I go and I try to look up MTS Dot again, it does not exist because we moved it into MTS Inc. And there's those transactions have all moved over, and you can maintain the history all still together in the proper vendor. So that's a fun way and easy way to be able to combine duplicate vendors or to change an ID. Last thing that I wanted to show, and I know I'm running out of time, I've got about 4 minutes left here. So right now, the way the economy has been lately, we're finding that a lot of our clients are really watching their cash flow very tightly. So one of the things that people have been coming to us consultants about is asking if there is a way that GP can tell them what their cash flow forecasting is. And we say, yes, absolutely there is. There is actually something called a cash flow calendar. It is based upon your terms, whether it be the terms from your suppliers and the amount of money that you are paying and you have to send money out. It is also based upon the terms that you've set for your customers and when you tell them that their payment is due by. So GP can take both of those modules and say, this is what we predict your cash is going to look like based upon certain bank accounts that you want to review. You can also put in there separate transactions that if you're wanting to do some scenarios. So I want to buy 4 vehicles and it's going to cost me $100,000 to buy those vehicles and I'd like to do it by the end of the month. What is that going to look like for me? I will show you. So under setup, in the middle of the, pardon me, you're in financial here now. In financial, under setup, about midway down the screen, you've got a cash flow forecast and a cash flow transaction. So the forecast itself, you have to ask some specific questions and answer what GL account do I want it to look at, what bank accounts do I want it to review, what do I want to look at between my modules. From my receivables, do I only want to look at open stuff, meaning entered and posted, or do I want to also take into account things that aren't yet posted, which would be work status? In purchasing, do I want to look at stuff that's only posted or stuff that's posted and unposted, as well as possibly purchase orders? So if I've already committed a purchase order and sent that off to a vendor, do I want to take that into account as a liability that I need to pay them? Looking at the sales, what do I want to base my cash inflow to be based on? Due date or average days paid? And if the general is my assumptions or my extraordinary transactions that I want to do. Under my cash flow transactions, here's my purchase of my vehicles where I said that I wanted to buy $100,000. Where you find this cash flow now is under financial inquiry, and I open up the calendar. So the calendar calculates receivables, payables, as well as those cash flow transactions, and it gives me a calendar. Anything in blue shows me cash coming in. Anything in red is cash going out. So my scheduled payables runs, this is how much I'm expected to pay based upon my payment dates and what those are. Here's that $100,000 transaction that I said I'm going to buy 5 new vehicles. And it's going to show me, based upon my setup, what my bank account is going to look like that I've attached this to. If I want to see what these transactions are, I just have to double click on them and it opens up what's called the Cash Flow Explorer. I can expand these options. So under my receivables, these are the transactions that I have money coming in. Here's my sales documents of cash expected to come in. If I'm paying out transactions, it will show me what's expected to be paid out. And here, if there were any POs, here's the POs that would be attached to it. I can change my dates. I can look at my calendar and change my calendar to show those other transactions as well. So you can manipulate your functionality within here as well. And that's cash flow calendar. I apologize, there was a question in here. Question going back to credit cards. Okay, give me 1 second with that, Jay. Any questions on cash flow calendar? No? Okay, so I'm going to open it up now to other questions that you may have. I'm going to answer Jay first here. It says, going back to credit card batches, can you enter invoices as normal and then go through select build batch credit card payments? Yes, absolutely you can, Jay. You can build your batch based upon whatever terms that you want. You can set payment priorities. You can identify your vendors that you pay by credit card in specific ways. You can also go through the edit, check batch, and hand pick the ones that you want to pay as well. Okay? Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to speak up or send questions through chat. No?
Well, while we're waiting for, oh. Cool.
You are very welcome, Chris. We will talk to you soon. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. And for the people who are trying to reach out to me, I'm just going to advance this here. I'll give you my contact information right here. Feel free to reach me. You can call me there, or you can also send any questions that you may have through to gpsupport@profit.ca, and any one of our consultants can assist you as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Jody, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to learn a little bit with us today. Keep an eye on your emails, because there are going to be invites to other webinars based on the user group coming up kind of throughout the summer and into the early fall, because we had a lot of stuff at the user group that we want to share with you. So yeah, keep an eye on that, and until next time, thanks for coming out.
Bye, everybody.